So I'm thinking a couple more weeks maybe we'll talk about this sugya, and then unless we take a turn at some point, I don't know. Then we'll go back to Sefer Yeshua. Maybe learn a little about the Yom Tovim coming up. We'll see. I don't know. But at least for another couple of weeks, we'll talk about this. And the truth is, you should know. This probably shouldn't come as a major surprise to hear this from me. But even though Shovavim is over, the mice of this Indian of the Eiruv Tab that we've been talking about is very near to Purim. It's going to get to Pesach. It's it'll continue on. So let's get back into it a little bit. I should 1 minute just to sort of get back into the sugi. We had a break last week. Your fault, my fault, not your fault. So we'll get back into it. What we've come to at this point is that the sugi of Shmir Sabris and Shmir Sinayim is much larger than just that particular aspect of Shmir Sabris, Shmir Sinayim. It's as we've established, it's part of a much bigger avodah, which is grappling and struggling with what's called the gullus of the Eiruv Tab. That's really what we've been discussing. And we were able to pinpoint over weeks what exactly the nekuda of this gullus is. And again, we've been talking about in more particular that it maybe comes to a head in terms of Shmir Sabris, but it's really the final gullus that we're in, is the gullus of the Eiruv Tab. And we've been able to establish and to pinpoint that the essential nekuda of this gullus is the gull is an opposition, is a klipa, is a tumah, is a yitzhar, in opposition to truly being alive. That's really the nekuda. We're all obviously physically alive, but in really embracing life and serving Hashem with chiyas and truly being alive, that is the klipa of the Eiruv Tab. And so Shmir Sabris, which in its most obvious form is what could be life is being abused and is not being used as life, so it's part of that inyan. But ultimately it's really about this nekuda of, am I going to live or am I going to live with not really being alive? That's the nekuda. Now, and in particular, we identified even further that within the midos that the Rebbeinu Shalom created the human being with, there are certain essential midos, certain characteristic traits that are the telltale signs and the markers for the siman of truly being alive. Because a person can go through, even avodas Hashem, a person can do mitzvahs, a person can do a lot of things, and not necessarily are those the markers or the simanim of, are you really alive? But there are certain midas which touch and really, come in contact with that part of us that is under attack by the Eiruv Tab, that's called truly being alive. And to identify what those midas are, that's what we began last time. And we're going to continue on with this for the next couple of weeks, just to identify what are those particular midos, and then the avodah of Shmir Sabris and Shmir Sinayim, and the avodah of grappling and struggling with the final goals of the Eiruv Tab is really focused on these midos. And once a person in our generation gets a good hold, so to speak, on their level of these particular midas, everything else falls into place. But if a person does not, really work on these particular midos, which are essential, and the simanim, like I said, the markers of truly being alive, which is really the attack of this galus, then everything else falls apart, and then you're struggling with every single nakuda. If a person's in a particular galus, if you could identify, what particular aspect of your Yiddishkeit is truly under attack in that galus, that if you could deal with that, then everything else falls into place. But if you ignore that essential nakuda and you just focus on the peripheral, on the repercussions and then it's impossible. Then you're juggling a million balls. But if you can identify what that galus is, it's no different than in Mitzrayim or in Bavel or in Paras and the galus Esav and galus Yishmael. There are certain nakudas that are under attack, and once that like Jenga piece is taken off, so the whole thing falls apart. But if you want to but the real avoid is to focus on that particular piece that's being pulled out, and make sure it's not pulled out, then everything stays in place. So that's the main avodah. So again, that was the idea that we're going through right now, is to identify what the midas are. Now, just one last moment of introduction. What I mentioned last time, 2 weeks ago, is that even before we begin to identify what the midos are, that are the markers and the ikra avodas of having a Yiddishkeit that's defined as being alive, there is one overarching and just general mindset that a person has to be in to allow these midas to be worked on, and that is patience. That's what we talked about, the patience, because life and being alive is something that needs time. It needs time to breathe. It needs time to develop. It needs time. And so when there's a lack of patience, b'chlal, and there's like quick fixes and things like that, those are, quick fixes are very good for the extremes and individual balls. But when you're trying to really grapple with those midas that are essentially connected with being alive, that requires messinus. It requires patience. That was just the general Indian that we spoke about last week. And again, that's why, by the way, let's say for example, when it came to Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? So the last little bit of Golus Mitzrayim, and as we spoke about for weeks already, that according to Arizal and the Zohar Kadosh and all the Mekubalim, the entire Indian of Golus Mitzrayim was really revolving around the Eiruv Tab. It was all revolving around the Eiruv Tab. So the final stage of Golus is that what? Is that Parah takes away the straw from the Jewish people, but doesn't decrease the amount of bricks that we have to produce. And everyone's in a hurry. There's no time to think. There's no one has time for patience. We're too busy. Why is that the final stage of the last weapon in Parah's arsenal to hold back Geula is making Jewish people impatient? So you see, that's the Nakuda, because patience is just the general atmosphere that you have to be in to allow life to cultivate. The baby has to develop 9 months. Things take time. In order for that we spoke about this, that one of the qualities of life, of the essential quality of life, is that it brings things together, right? Without the neshama, when God forbid if a person's not alive, then the body falls apart, right? Life, one of the great telltale signs of something being alive is that it's not falling apart. Things are being pulled in. So for extremes to be pulled in together, it takes time for it to mesh, for it to melt. So patience is a more than just a good virtue. Patience is essential. In all of Avodas Hashem, patience is essential, but especially in this Golus of the Eiruv Tab, when it comes to all these things that we're going to be talking about, patience is very, very important. Especially, by the way, when it comes to Pnimis HaTorah, as I mentioned, which is the neshama, the life of Torah, takes a lot of patience. Anyway, that's all going to the side. So what you have in front of you, the top part of the page is a chart which we had from a couple of weeks ago. These are the 10 basic midos that the Rebbeinu Shalom created every human being with. Everyone is created with chesed, everyone's created with gevura, with tiferes, all these midos. Now everyone has different measurements of each one. Some people will be more tilted to those midos that are on the left side. Those midas, some people are tilted to the midas on the right side. And each one has its own particular quality. And we're not. Our point over here is not to go through each particular one, but just to identify, to explain the midos that we're all made of, which are these midas that this chart is displaying over here. The midas that are essentially about life, being alive, the expression of life, the markers of life are the ones that are in the middle column. So the middle column, that's the Jenga piece that Golus of Eiruv Tab is trying to pull out. Okay, and that's what we're going to go through the next couple of weeks. These midas in the middle, and we're going to see how it's mamish. They're mamish. All of them are under attack, and when any one of these particular midas of the middle are damaged, then every midah of the middle is damaged, and it results in a breakdown of everything else, right? Because once the centerpiece is taken off, when the middle column is uprooted, then everything falls apart. And very often when a person's Yiddishkeit is falling apart, they're focused on the midas on the left and the midas on the right, right? When in truth, what's really the essential problem is that the middle column has been uprooted. And when you put the middle column back into place, then the left and the right side sort of take care of themselves. And so there's two approaches, So the long-term, healthier, more stable approach is to fix the middle column. So let's go through this. In a general sense, and we're going to go through each one, but in a general sense, the way it breaks down is as follows. The midas that are on the right and the midas that are on the left, okay? So let's say the ones on the right are Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach. And the midas on the left are Bina, Gvur, and Hod. We're not talking about Kabbalah over here. This is just psychology over here, just human experience. These midas are mostly about like what you do, what you think, how you react. They're almost tangible. So those are mostly about the extremes, left and the right. Again, without going to each one and whatever, but they're about how you function. What are you doing? So you can do chesed, right? You can do gevura. You could think chachma type of thoughts. You could think bina type of thoughts. But those are somewhat external. The ones in the middle are not about what you're doing, but they're about who are you as you're doing it. So because there's always two separate things. There's what a person does, but then there's like, who are you? Because a person could go through the motions, right? I mean, if a guy comes collecting for tzedakah, you could physically do chesed, right? You could physically force your hand in your pocket, take out $1 and give it to him. You can do such a thing, but that's so. What you just did at that moment was an act that was connected to the midah of chesed. But that's not necessarily who you were. That's not who you are. Were you alive? Were you engaged at that moment? Lav dafka. And the same thing is the opposite. If you have discipline a kid or a student or whatever the case may be, so you have to yell at the kid or you have to take the toy away or whatever. You have to punish the person. But you don't really want to. So that's also an experience of gevura. So you're doing gevura, but you're not really gevurdik at the moment. You're going through the motions of gevura. And then you have to. So sometimes you have to go through the motions of chesed, and sometimes you have to go through the motions of gevura. But those are midas that are fundamentally about what you're doing and how you're reacting and what things like that. But the middle midas are going to be more essentially about who you are within yourself, unrelated to anyone else, just within yourself. Okay, so let's go through each one. The first midah is keser. Okay, now this I mentioned already from last week. So what we're going to talk about today are the first two midas of the middle, which is keser and das. Now, just a little bit of a background. I know everything's been background so far. I get it, but if you count all the midos, then in this little chart over here, there's 11. Right? Now, usually we think of there being 10 midos. Okay. Now, the way it works out is that the way this Ramak Dashim explained, Arizal, is that when you count the midas of a person, Keser and Das are usually not counted together. Either you're counting Keser or you're counting Das, which already tells us that Keser and Das are obviously going to be related to each other. Okay, so what is it? Keser means, in our context, Keser means what you want. Your Ratzon. Keser means Ratzon. That's what Keser means, crown, which is always associated with a king, right? And a king does what he wants. That's what a king means, right? There's no one on top of the king. The king, he's in charge. The king is in charge. And Keser, therefore, means Ratzon, your will, your desire. What do you want? Which means that one of the most important puzzle pieces of the middle is to really clarify what you want and to do things because you want to do it. Because you want to do it. And this is one of the most important qualities and simanim of being alive. Because, in Chabad Hasidus we're taught that will to want something is itself an expression of life. It's an expression of life. If I could sort of imagine, if I could focus my life on a particular thing, it means I want it. See, we tend to think of will and desire as something that we react to. This is something I want because I just want it and I go with it. But Keser means to bring willpower out of yourself. Again, all the midas of the middle are things that you are in control of. These are not reactive experiences. This is you. Again, the guy that comes to for tzedakah and you force your hand in your pocket, it's kind of reactive. I mean, I'm doing this act because this guy's here and he needs money. I'm pulling the toy away from the kid, not because I want to, because that's the situation demands of it. The midas of the middle are going to be within yourself. And Keser means that there's a capability within the person to decide within yourself what you want. Now that's a chiddush. And appreciate that that's a chiddush, because for the most part we think that what we want has been decided for us. I came into the world liking chocolate. I came into the world liking vanilla. It's not up to me. But if a person goes through life like that they're never choosing what they want. They're not bringing out Ratzon. They're not bringing out their willpower. They're not deciding for themselves what they truly want in life. Then the keser of their world is damaged. Because then if keser is damaged, then everything in life is then going to be reactive. Keser means that you're the king of your own you're the king of your own castle, which means that you have the ability, within reason. Obviously, none of us are in control of everything, but within reason, we have the ability to awaken within ourselves a will, a ratzon, a desire. And that ultimately is the greatest sign of life. It's the beginning of where life comes from. The biggest symbol of life is ratzon, is to want. And when you do something that you truly want to do, then when you do it, or when you think it, you are deeply connected to that experience. And that's what das is. Keser means to want something, and das means that now that I'm doing it, I am deeply connected to that experience. Because again, so for example, a person can be thinking about a certain topic. It could be something holy. You could be learning a Gemara, right? And your mind is engaged. But we all have had this experience that you go through something. It could be, again, like I said, something holy like a piece of Gemara, and 15 minutes later, you forgot about it, right? It's out of your head. Why? Well, sometimes it's because it's very complicated, and complicated ideas are hard to hold on to. It's not your fault. But sometimes it's not because it's so complicated. It's because even when you were learning it, it wasn't with hiskashras. It wasn't with a connection to that material. And when there's a lack of connection to the material, then it's similar to just forcing your hand in your pocket and giving money to the person, or forcing your hand to take away the toy. You're not really there. So you could not be really there even when you're thinking about something. The difference between learning a topic that you remember and learning a topic that you don't remember is whether your das was engaged. Was I makusher? Was I truly invested in the material? Was there das? And the determining factor of whether there was das goes back to Keser. Why do I really want to do this? And if a person doesn't really want to do it, then of course they're not going to be truly engaged in the experience, and the experience therefore is going to be fleeting. But if a person is able to conjure up within themselves a real desire to experience something, to do something, then when they do it, it's going to be with das. So that's what it means that Keser and das are related to each other. And you don't have to count one, you don't have to count both. When you have one, automatically you have the other. If whatever I'm doing, if I'm doing it beratzon, if I'm doing it with bechira, with my choice, bechira is also connected with Keser, right? Keser is a king, and a king does something out of his choice. That's what bechira is. So bechira is an unbelievable gift, because when a person is able to be boicher, when we're able to do something, and it's because I have chosen to do it, then that means that what I'm going to do, I am actually experiencing it. It's not just happening around me. I am experiencing it. Now when this takes place, when a person is doing something, and again, it takes time for a person to become maybe excited. There could be something that you have to do, and you're choosing to do, but you're not necessarily excited to do it. But and this is a big avoid, and we could spend a long time on this. I don't think we're going to, but this inyan of developing a sense of ratzon, of really developing a sense of ratzon, which takes thought and takes contemplation. It takes time and like I said, patience, to develop this idea. Why do I want it? What are the repercussions of me choosing this way, me not choosing this way? Of really developing this ability within yourself to motivate your will and to bring out your ratzon for something. Then you're connected to that particular inyan, and then those experiences are real, they're meaningful, and they're touching a part of you that brings out life. That's what it means to be alive. This is the difference between a person engaged in a certain activity. An activity can be a dead activity or a live activity. And the difference is this nakuda, whether am I truly, is my ratzon engaged in this activity? Is my das engaged in this activity? Now, by the way, what we're going to see now is an amazing thing, which is that when a person is involved in an activity that is being done with keser and das, then automatically the experience you have in that, the feeling you have in that experience is defined as simcha. Okay, and this is what we're going to see. It's very much connected to the time that we're in, getting close to Purim. What is the definition of simcha? Simcha is one of those things. I spoke about this. I think on Sukkot, one of the shirim I gave on Sukkot, we talked about this. Now we'll talk about it a little bit more, I guess, inside. What is the definition of Simcha? We're not already Mishnichus Admar b'Simcha, Purim, and so on. What is Simcha? Simcha just means to smile, means to dance. Like, what does Simcha mean? Like the question that I've raised before is that Chazal, the Mefarsh already asked this question. Chazal say that a person cannot be a Navi, can't experience Nevuah unless you're b'Simcha. So the Mefarshim asks, so how in the world is Yirmiyahu Navi, having Nevuah about the Churban Beis Hamikdash? How is he writing Megillas Eicha b'Simcha? Right? If Simcha means to be smiling and jumping and dancing, then how in the world are you doing that? Talking about Churban Beis Hamikdash. The answer is the definition. That's what we're going to see right now. Is that the definition of Simcha is what it feels like to do something with your Keser and Das. That's what Simcha feels like. Therefore, Simcha is always associated with being alive. Being alive. When Adam Rishon sinned and he brought death to the world, so it says in Pasuk, obviously the two punishments that Adam has is what? Is that now you're going to be mortal, and the other punishment is that you're going to have to work to make a living, and you're going to eat all the profits of your life with sadness. Sadness and death are connected to each other. Simcha and life are connected to each other. Right? By Purim, what's the whole Yontif of Purim about? Haman is threatening the Jewish people with death. Our response to Haman, our victory over Haman, which means the victory of life over death, means Simcha. Why is that? Because Simcha is the feeling that you have when you are activated. When you are activated, when you are doing something because you have conjured up within yourself a desire to do it. And because of that, when you're doing it, you're all in. You're experiencing it. That's what we call Simcha. That could be an experience of something that you want to smile about, or that could be an experience of something that you want to cry about. But either way, if you are invested, if you are activated, if Keser and Das is engaged, then that's called Simcha. There's a famous joke, right? It's a little bit not so nice, but there's a joke that they say, why is it that in Megillas Esther, they're psukim with the trap of Eicha, right? So the joke is because you want Misnagdim to have Simchas Purim too, right? That's the joke. That's anti-Semitic, so that's not so nice. But so what's Sakiv Shad? Sakiv Shad is because you have to appreciate the question, right? Because we're assuming that when you're listening to Megillas Esther, you're really listening and you're really, with Keser and Das, and you're really activated. And so then all of a sudden it's Gevaldik, it's very nice, it's the Purim Niggin, so it's Simcha Dik, and then all of a sudden Kelim Shonim, right? And then you throw into Tisha B'Av. So if you're just like listening on the outside, okay, it's an afkamina. But if you're really, really living Megillas Esther, then you're mamish being thrown into Tisha B'Av at that moment. So it's taka a good kasha. And it doesn't deserve a kasha like that. It doesn't deserve like a silly answer like that. It's a real kasha. The answer is it's not a steer to Simchas Purim. By the Mekubalim, there's an idea that the word that the midah of das is itself divided in half. There is what's called the chasadim of das, and that's what's called the gevuras of das. Without getting into complicated inyanim, but what does that mean? It means that das itself, which means that you're activated, that you're alive, and you're b'simcha. Well, that can mean in two ways. It could be experiences that are smiley experiences, and then there's Tisha B'Av experiences. And the amazing yontiv of Purim is that the life of the Jewish people encompasses both. And more than that, there's to truly be alive and engaged in any particular moment, you have to have the part of your heart that's smiling and a part of your heart which is crying. Maybe we'll talk about this in Kamis, but that's the deepest level of simcha, is when you're able to realize, to experience both, to be able to, engage in experiences in life that bring out, conflicting emotions. And that's good, because that's the sum total of who you are. Like I said, those midas in the middle are bringing the extremes together. So they're going to be complicated. They're going to be complex. So a person is conjuring up their kesed, their desire. It's like, it takes avoida. It takes avoida. And then when you're involved in that experience, then there's a part of you that's happy, and there's a part of you that wants more, and it's unsatisfied, and all of that, all these inyanim are being conjured up, and that's good. That's what it means to be alive. To be alive means to be happy and satisfied and unsatisfied at the same time. That's what it means to be a human being. But when that part of who we are, the middle column, is being ignored, then you're just shut off. That's called sadness. That's called atzvus. Let's see inside. You'll see what I mean. Take a look at Maramakim number 1. Okay, this is from the Maharal in Sefer Gvuras Hashem. He's talking about in Perek Mem Vav. He's talking about the fact that we have the mitzvah of Simchas Yantiv. We have mitzvah to be happy, right? Simcha on all the Yom Tovim, on the Shalosh Regalim, especially Sukkot. So he says like this: why is that? What is it about Yantiv that results in Simcha? These 3 holidays that we have, Nikroim Zmani Simcha, right? They're called times of joy. Why? Ki kol havaya goyrim simcha. Because existence results in joy. Existing, being alive, results in joy. The kol hefsid goyrim tsar. And death, non-existing, creates what we call tsar or sadness. That's the definition of simcha. Simcha is the emotional result of existing. K'dichsiv, as it says in Pasuk, Yismach Hashem b'ma'asav. That Hashem rejoices with existence. The opposite, when Hashem decided to destroy humanity with the Mabul, so Hashem is described as being depressed. Because, what does that mean?
The Masa doesn't mean action. The Masa doesn't mean action?
The actions of it? No, it means life. It means the existence that Hashem brought into the world with His actions. So that's what it means. When things are existing, that's simcha. When things are turning the corner to non-existence, like by the Mabul, then that's sadness. L'kacha simcha beilu hazmanim. That's why there's joy during Yom Tovim. Why? Shekulam havayas ha'olam. Because each Yom Tov, in its own way, expresses the world existing. The world existing. So he says, Shevekol regel v'regel yishtover havaya ba'olam. Every single Yom Tov is the beginning of a particularly new season, a new chapter in the calendar of existence, of life. For example, the Pesach hu havayis ha'aviv. Pesach is the existence of the aviv, of the spring season. Uba Shavuos hu ha'katzer, and Shavuos is the harvest season. The harvest. Uba Chag ha'asif, and by Sukkot hu ha'asifa. That's the time, the gathering time, when you bring the tefuah into the house. Ugamkin tikkun tefuah. That's when the produce is now existing, so to speak. Maybe Aislabayas, Shalayah Hefsidba, and Adrabah, and by Sukkot is even more simcha, because not only is it just another stage in the seasons, but now the tefuah is brought into your home and it's complete. It didn't rot. It wasn't. It exists. Because again, any time which is connected with existing and expressing and bringing out the fact that you exist, nikras man shel simcha. That's called a time for simcha. In the language of the second Lubavitcher Rebbe in the second Maramakim in Parshas B'Shalach. So now he's saying in a more that was the moralical language, right? That's the moralical language, that existence is connected to simcha, non-existence is tsar. The language of Chassidus. So he says the following: the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. Hasimcha geremes v'chinas hispashtus v'gilui ha'or v'achiyas ma'hanefesh b'kol ivarm. Simcha is the phenomenon of the life force of your neshama expanding to every limb of your body. When life that's just in potential in your neshama is able to come out in the open and actually bring life to your life, that's what we call simcha. Shari ha'atzvus Garamis bechinas kivutz belev hepechis pashtus, and sadness, atzvos, depression, is the experience of the life force that should be, bringing everything in your life together and should be activating every cell of your body, is now being constricted and being pulled back and sort of being reserved and going back into its little shell. That's what we call sadness. Ubehechrich leimer shasimcha isis pashtus belev. And we know this, that simcha is this inyan of what? Of life moving from the heart, expanding itself and bringing the whole life into the whole body into life. The Gemara says a famous story that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai got good news about something, and all of a sudden he couldn't put a shoe back on, or he couldn't put a shoe back on because Simcha just made his body expand, right? Simcha has this way of expansiveness, and so on and so forth. That's the idea. Which, by the way, once we've identified that when Keser and Das are activated, when I'm able to arouse within myself a ratzon to do something, and I do it with hiskashrus because I want to do it, and the result therefore is simcha. So we know that there's a principle that you can go backwards, which means that what's a good eitzah to bring out keser and to bring out das is to conjure up simcha, right? Because very often things go both ways. So the normal approach is first have a good keser, first have a good ratzon, bring out within yourself a deep desire, choose to do this particular act. Then when you do it, you're going to do it with all of your kaiches, and memelo you'll be besimcha. But there is such an idea that's called in the Svarim an or yashar, a light that goes from above to below, where it goes in the normal process, keser to das, you're besimcha. But there is such a phenomenon that's called an or chayzer, a returning light, a light that goes backwards, which means that you can fake it, be besimcha, do the experiences that we usually associate with being besimcha, and then all of a sudden, things go backwards. Your das and keser are activated. This could be even the most simplest of things. Once the second Bible Rebbe identifies, once we see that simcha is related to the experience of life, going from the neshama and sort of bringing the body, active, the life force of your neshama expanding itself to every single limb of your body. That's what simcha feels like. Then that's why when a person exercises, for example, all of a sudden you feel better. You feel better. And all of a sudden, after you're exercising, you're a little bit healthier, then the Gemara that you learn, you remember more. And all of a sudden, you're just in a better mood. And all of a sudden, Shmir Sabris and Shmir Sinai is not the biggest avodas in the world. So you could explain that. It's like, okay, fine. I don't know what. Exercise, I just feel better about myself. But on a deeper level, that's what's going on, is that you're mimicking this process. Because what usually should start with keser, das, and then all the limbs of my body are now full of vitality and life. And that's what simcha is. So you're just going the opposite. You're going the opposite. You're forcing your limbs to be full of vitality and life through jogging. And memela, which is the result usually of keser and das being activated, but now you're just going backwards. That's really the simcha of Purim as well. All this is connected to Purim. Think about it for a second. In Purim, there's a lot to talk about. In Purim, there's an interesting phenomenon. It's one of those things that it goes a little bit unnoticed in the Megillah, but once you pick up on it, it's mamish there. Persia was an interesting country. When we think of kings of old, we think of them as having absolute power. Absolute power. A king can do mamish whatever he wants. And you sort of feel that in Ahasuerus. Everyone's terrified of him. He can do whatever he wants. But you do see this in the Megillah, is that there were rules. And even the king cannot truly do everything he wants. So, for example, when he wants to kill Vashti, right? So kill Vashti. You're Ahasuerus. Do whatever you want. Kill Vashti. It's okay. But no. He has to he has to go to the Supreme Court. He has to go to the people that are in charge, because as the Megillah says, that's the das, that's the rules, and that's the regulations, that for the king to replace the queen, he has to get permission. And even later on, when the decree of Haman is rescinded, so what does Ahasuerus say? I can't just, once the seal is made and it goes out with the official letterheads of the king, you can't take it back. Well, you can't take it back. You're the king. Do whatever you want. No, because in Persia, the king was a king. He had a lot of power, but he didn't have all the power. You see what's going on over there. That Paras was a kingdom that was set up where there's a pagam in Keser. You follow this? There's a pagam in Keser. Because Keser means ratzon. Keser means ratzon. And the whole inyan of Golas Purim, the whole inyan of Gezeres Haman, which is to kill the Jewish people death, means it starts with what? With a pagam in Keser. And so that's what Haman says to the Jewish people, about the Jewish people, that they're keeping mitzvahs, but yishenim, they're asleep. They're asleep in the do mitzvahs. Sleep is what? Is a 60th of death, which means that they're keeping Shabbos. But they're not keeping Shabbos because they want to keep Shabbos. They're keeping Shabbos because they have to keep Shabbos. What happened in Purim, which resulted in the Gezeres of Haman, is what? Is that the Keser of the Jewish people was damaged. And that reflected itself in many ways. It reflected itself in the Jewish people not doing mitzvahs with ratzon. it reflected itself even in everything is created from Torah. So it reflected itself even in the societal governing laws and regulations of Paras, that the king can't do whatever he wants. And that's why Haman, it's an amazing thing, that's why Haman has to tell Achashverosh. Remember in the Purim story, he has this whole spiel, right? He has this whole thing, Memuchan, he says, you can't, that's what happens. Achashverosh wants to kill Vashti, right? So he goes to the courts, because that's the rules, that's the das, that's the rules. You have to go, you can't just kill the queen, you have to get permission. And the government says, you asked her to come out in such a mavuzadika way, and now you want to kill her for that? No, the answer is no. You can't kill. That's not kedas or kedin. You can't kill the queen because of that. But then Memuchan Haman comes with the whole shtickle tar. What's the shtickle tar? No. This is not a private Indian that she happened to disgrace him, which doesn't fit under the regulations of being able to kill the queen. This was something that's of national security. Because now if the word gets out that she disrespected the king, then every family is going to be in such a way that the wife is going to rebel against her husband, and the whole society is going to fall apart. This is much bigger than just this Indian. And Mamela, it's now, it's a time of war. The king should be able to do what he wants. You see what's going on over there? It's all within rules. The king can't do whatever he wants. But all this is a result of the pagam of Keser. When there's Keser as Nifgam. So of course now that the Yidden are not doing mitzvahs because they want to, because they feel they have to. And Memela, when they do mitzvahs, they're doing it sleepfully. And Memela, the Ir Shushan is depressed. Everyone's debrachin. And Memela, it's only a matter of time till Haman decides, Lahashim L'Arababi. Because we did that to ourselves. We killed ourselves by not being besimcha in mitzvahs in Yiddishkeit. So what is the antidote? What's the Hatzalah of Purim? The Hatzalah of Purim, the Hatzalah of Mordechai is, be besimcha. You don't feel it? Pretend. Be a nar. Be childish. Right? That's, like Rabbi Nachman says, sometimes when a person's ba'atzvus, then do something silly. Go exercise. Hear a silly joke. I don't know. Do something to force your life force to expand into your limbs, which should be the result of a healthy keser and a healthy das, but just do it backwards. This is why even the Megillah is kind of backwards. It's kind of backwards. How does the Megillah start? I would start the Megillah with, there was a king, Achashverosh, who ruled 120 provinces from Haida to Kush. And during his time, he made a big party. That's normal. Step one, step two. That's not how the Megillah reads. The Megillah reads, Vahiv me Achashverosh. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. Who is Achashverosh? Let's go back. In his time, he made a party. The whole site of Purim is going backwards. The whole site of Purim is our chayzer. That when things aren't working from top down, so go bottom up. So go backwards. So usually the parent is in charge of the child. On Purim, the child is in charge of the parent. And everything's been hapechu. Like I mentioned, I don't remember at some point that the old minig. There was a minig, such a thing that on Purim there's the Purim Rav and there's the Purim Dayan and the Purim Rebbe, and the biggest Amaretz in the shul becomes the Rav, right? So everything's been a hapechu. The side of an hapechu of Purim is that there is an Inyan going backwards, and if the Keser can't be awakened and you can't get das going, and Memela, the energy is not encompassing your whole life, then go backwards. Then do some activities on a physical level which force your energies to expand in your whole life. And Memela, you'll be able to then make decisions with more rats and more chayshah. That's sometimes how you work. It's okay to go backwards sometimes. That's the idea. Okay, let's just finish off real quick over here. So that's the two midas of your keser and das. That's what we're talking about. If you take a look at Maramaka number 3, the rest of this is really just going to be, we already spoke about this, but let's just see what together. The Tanya says like this: now that we have this proper definition of simcha and it's in its place in the world, that's why if you keep your eyes open when you learn the Surah Doshim, you'll find this, especially in Kutam Aran, that das, whenever you find das is always associated with simcha. Das and simcha go together. That's why what's interesting is that Purim is the simcha of Purim is ad loya, right? Ad loya, because it's not the normal approach. The normal approach is keser, das, memela, simcha. But over here, what's happening is some backwards experience, simcha, and memela. There's das and there's keser. That's why it's okay. When it comes to Purim, people have word is complaint is not the right word, but people have expressed, to me that learning about Purim is such a gewaltige time for davening and so on. And then on Purim, it's like just balagan. It's just balagan. They don't have the headspace to do anything. The shalchmanas, it's all over the place. Yeah, that's what Purim is. Purim is backwards. Purim is not head down to action. It's action up to head. That's what Purim is. That's the whole meaning of Purim is to go backwards. Purim doesn't make sense. That's what it's supposed to be. That's the chiddush of Purim. That when things aren't working in the normal approach, top down, okay, then go bottom up, and then the Yetzer Hara Haman is not going to be able to react to that because the Yetzer Hara is not going to stop you from exercise. The Yetzer Hara is going to stop you from sitting down and really being mizbaining and really contemplating about how chashuv it is to learn Gemara. That's what the Yetzer Hara is going to stop you. But the Yetzer Hara is not going to stop you from exercise. That's why it's brought down this farm that there's a ma'isa they say from one of the big tzaddikim, I can't remember who, one of the Talmidei Baal Shem, that he used to wake up very early in the morning, very early. And so his Talmidim asked him, Rebbe, how do you how do you do it? So he said very simple. He said, when I wake up, I set the alarm, whatever it is, when I wake up, so my Yetzer Hara says, Yankel, go back to sleep. It's still dark outside. So he says, I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to learn. I'm going to work. I want to get a head start on Parnasa, or I want to go jogging. I'm learning. I'm not going to learn. And the Yetzer Hara is like, okay, fine. You want to go work? Exercise isn't that. I'm not going to stop you for that. Once I'm up, then I go learn. That's what he said. Right? So it sounds like a little bit of a silly zach, but it's mamish true. You have to trick the Yetzer Hara. You have to go backwards, right? Because there's certain areas that he's not paying attention to. He's not thinking that exercising is going to bring you to a black gemara. That's not the cheshbon that he makes. But it can, right? I'm talking about exercising just really for myself, or whatever the thing is. Whatever the thing is, each person finds their backwards Indian, whatever conjures up simcha, and obviously in holy it has to be kosher, obviously. The things that cause simcha, it'll eventually lead you to the black gemara. So you go backwards. It's So okay, let's skip a little bit. Let's go to Marmukah number 6. Okay, Marmukah number 6, the Maral. This is also the Maral in Tiferes Yisrael. Sefer Tiferes Yisrael, Perek Lamed Hey. He's talking about, it's actually from this pack's parsha, and it's related to everything we're talking about. Is that when Hashem gave us the luchos, right? The luchos were given in such a way where their ksuvim, mizam zehem ksuvim, that they're etched. The surfaces were etched all the way through, right? It wasn't just on the surface; it was etched all the way through. And by the way, that phenomenon of the luchos being etched all the way through is also related to Purim, right? Because the pasuk says that when Esther Malka heard about Haman's decree, she sends a message to Mordechai asking him, Al Mazeh ve'al Mazeh, like why is there this decree of Haman? And the response was, because the Jewish people have forsaken the Torah, which was written mizeh u'mizeh, which were written on the luchos through and through. So, okay, that's the Gemara. So that's what's hinted to. Then Esther Malka says she's sending a message to Mordechai that about Haman, al mazeh ve'al mazeh, that it's because the Jewish people have forsaken the Torah, which is engraved in luchos through and through. Okay, there's a lot of ways to hint to the fact that we are not keeping Torah. It's this Indian, the luchos being through and through. So the Maral says like this: Shayaksav me'ever le'ever. Right, the luchos were written through and through. They were etched through and through. Because this is the difference between a Yiddishkeit with Keser and Das and a Yiddishkeit without Keser and Das. A Yiddishkeit that's alive, that's able to combat Haman, or a Yiddishkeit that's dead and that's asleep, that is prey for Haman. Which is what? Is it a piece of you, or is it your whole thing? See, if the luchos are etched through and through means with your entirety. It means with your ratzon, with your das. It means b'simcha. And that's what the symbolism is with the luchos being etched through and through. It's not just a piece. Like the rock is you. You know what I mean? And so where is the Torah in your life? Okay, so it's on the surface. It's etched in a little bit over here. But that's not going to result in a Yiddishkeit of life. A Yiddishkeit of life is going to be symbolic of luchos, that the words are etched through and through. Every single part of me is engaged in the inyan. And that's exactly what Esther Malka is telling Mordechai, is that the reason why we're falling prey to Haman is because we've forsaken the Torah that's etched in the luchos through and through. That's exactly what the inyan is. And so our response is to get a Yiddishkeit that's through and through. But how do you do that when your keser is messed up? When you're living in Persia, the king can't do whatever he wants. Even the king can't do whatever he wants. The answer is you do something silly. And you're b'simcha, and then mela, things go backwards. And that's okay. So he says, says in Moral, if the luchas were not etched through and through, that means that only part of the luchas would be affected by the tar. Only part of it would be there, would be present. It's like giving the money from your pocket. You're not fully engaged. That's like the luchas being partially engraved. And that's not befitting of Torah. That's befitting of a Jew. A Jew and Torah has to be something complete. Something complete. And Marwalk number 7, just to end with this, so Rav Kook, following this idea, Rav Kook says, Kiyam HaTorah, that the way a Jew should keep Torah is tzarech lavim his gabrus koyach haruchani shebaoime kedushas hanashama. Yiddishkeit should really be something that we're keeping because of an overwhelming flow of energy coming from the neshama. It's like you're just like compelled to keep the Torah. It's overflowing. It's like a horse running into battle. It's just you're all in. Sheshaitif es shetev achayim shalai al tenuas adam kulai b'shetev pisaimi. That the flow of life, it just engulfs you in this instantaneous, overwhelming experience that brings you to Yiddishkeit. That's called Keser and Das being activated, and that's Yiddishkeit that's caused the simcha. B'loya drogit is not like in this, it's a bisla. To be alive. V'chibur chalakim shel tzav l'tzav kav l'kav, pieces here, pieces there, to be mamash alive. And again, like I said, that's what was under attack by Purim, and the response usually would be, okay, fine, so then just fix it. But the chiddush of Purim is that you can fix it by going backwards. And so that's sometimes the eitzah. When you learn these types of things, so it's like overwhelming. I'm supposed to get myself to want. I don't want to want. I don't even want to want. I'm supposed to want. I don't want to want, because if I want, it means I'm going to be having to change my schedule. I don't want to change my schedule. I don't want to want. The answer is, go jogging. Go jogging. You feel good about yourself. Or the opposite. Let's say you don't have an in with exercise. So go have a good meal. The opposite, right? So go eat a fat steak or something and get yourself. That's for half the room. Fine. So you get not particular half. I'm just saying. Get yourself feeling good. And then making brachas, because you have to send eating. If you don't make brachas properly, then it's just adding, it's feeding your nefesh v'ham. So you have to eat a good meal with the bracha rishana, bracha achrayna, with kavana, and then you'll see that you'll all of a sudden want to go to daven and want to go learn, and everything will be good. Hashem. So, by the way, along with that line, so this coming week, like every other week, so we'll just mechazik, I forgot to mention in the beginning, we have 2 minyanim, 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And Lamaisa, we want to be able to make sure it starts on time, people say Kaddish and so on. So if it fits with anyone's schedule, please